收看国际辩论社第29集的播出。台湾总统大选刚刚落幕，但是一连串的国际攻防还有焦点随即展开。那这场选举的结果会如何带领台湾未来的走向？而美中台的关系又会有什么样的转变呢？我们在这期节目当中邀请2位台湾政治研究领域的外国学者专家葛来仪还有孔明尚，分别为我们做了深入的探讨分析。那么在这周，我们首先要看到美国2024年的总统大选，共和党初选首先在爱荷华州开跑了。川普一如外界预期获得了过半数的支持，遥遥领先了党内其他的对手。川普向支持者喊话，说要把国家给夺回来，让美国再次伟大。尽管官司缠身，挟着超人气的川普可能跟拜登再度的对决，要上演的是平均年龄创新高的美国总统选战。
跟着音乐摇摆身体，迎接众人喝彩。美国前总统川普这一刻骄傲不已。
Well, I want to thank everybody. This has been some period of time, and most importantly, we want to thank the great people of Iowa.
共和党总统提名初选第一站在爱荷华州，川普势如破竹。
Trump topping 50% with most of the vote counted. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis pulling off a needed second-place showing.
一次初选辩论都没参与的川普压倒性拿下超过1半票数，第2名的佛州州长德桑提斯连川普1半都不到，等于川普几乎躺着都会赢。
The Iowa delegates will then be proportionally distributed among the candidates based on their share of the statewide vote.
爱荷华州将有40名代表参加共和党全国代表大会，这些代表票将根据全州投票结果按比例分配给候选人。虽然爱荷华州只占全美1.6%，但因为是第一个召开党团会议的州，向来被视为总统大选风向标。
This is the first because the big night is going to be in November when we take back our country and truly we do make our country great again. Thank you very much, everybody.
川普重申经典口号嗨翻，放眼今年11月大选，美国恐怕又是2位阿公对决。
Would you be running for president if Trump wasn't running?
I expect so, but look, he is running, and I have to run.
81岁的拜登已经喊话非川普不选，目前党内也没有其他竞争者。届时平均年龄近80岁的2位候选人角逐白宫，这一次刷新美国政坛纪录。三立新闻杨俊宗报道。
中国渔船经常非法越界捕捞，为邻国带来困扰。近日，又有一艘200吨级的中国渔船闯入了南韩的专属经济海域，被逮个正着。而且，南韩的海警呢，还发现说，中国渔船使用的是法律禁止的大型渔网，在捕捞的时候，不仅呢是把大鱼，就连鱼苗也是一网打尽，可以说是破坏海洋生态永续的杀手。
南韩海警不断挥舞旗帜，要求这艘闯入专属经济海域、重达200吨的中国渔船马上停下来。而一登船搜查，果然发现多达600公斤的越界非法捕捞渔获。
범장망은 길이가 250m, 폭이 70m가 넘는 대형 어구로 촘촘한 그물로 치어까지 무차별 어획이 가능해 배타적 경제 수역에서 사용이 금지돼 있습니다.
令南韩当局跳脚的是，中国渔船不但使用违法的大型渔网，将鱼苗也一网打尽，严重破坏海洋生态永续发展，更采打了就跑的游击战术，一旦被抓包就火速拆下渔网逃逸，留下破渔网，让南韩善后。
뺄 때는 짧으면 최소한 15분에서 길어도 한 20분 내 작업을 끝낼 수 있기 때문에. 시간이 짧아서 좀 단속이 어려운 점이 있습니다.
4개월만 하고 나면 소진이 끝나버리는데 4개월 남은 4개월 동안 어떻게 단속을 할 겁니까?
선장! 계속해서 도주 중!
中国渔船亲门踏户，类似情况不断上演。像这艘360吨的船只，就非法捕捞多达1.6吨的渔获。南韩方面也回呛，将加强取缔，并增强巡逻力道，绝不宽待。三立新闻简讯会报道。
台湾人游南韩必打卡的传统市场，被南韩的网红发现，说摊贩竟然把外国客当成肥羊坑杀，一盘简单的小菜拼盘就要350元台币，还只有正常分量的不到70%。不仅仅是外国观光客受害，就连网红他自己来实际测验一下，一样被收取了高价。业者甚至呢把价目表改为手动的粘贴，好看心情来涨价， 疑似还为了躲避查账，只准现金支付。
이게 15,000원이에요?
南韩网红镜头前吃闷亏，他到首尔观光客体验在地美食的广藏市场，没想到却被当肥羊，遭摊贩当外国客坑杀。
광장시장에는 바가지 요금 논란이 일었습니다. 가격에 비해 음식량이 이렇게 턱없이 부족한 데다
一份小菜拼盘不到正常分量70%，却要350块钱，不止贵还吃不饱。SBS 记者到市场还发现摊贩抬价的暗黑手法。 像是价目表数字全变成手工粘贴，卖多少钱看业者心情，每天都不一样。南韩为抢观光客，夜市也能行动支付，但记者要掏手机付钱时却被拒绝，不免让人质疑业者是为躲避查账。
솔직히 시장 하면은 이제 카드 잘 안 받으시잖아요. 그러니까 이제 계좌이체나 현금 이런 거 다 생각해서 이제 준비해 왔죠.
只是许多不知情的观光客早已准备好大把现钞，被哄骗也只能傻傻买单，逼得南韩政府现在也出手整顿歪风，免得好不容易回流的观光人潮被黑心业者给吓跑。三立新闻严欣怡报道。
台湾总统大选落幕，全球多国的政要致意祝贺，引发中国外交部强烈不满。那美国国务卿布林肯呢，也是出席了世界经济论坛。他不仅再次的赞扬台湾民主的珍贵，说台湾大选是对民主价值的肯定，也重申台湾作为世界重要的经济命脉，台海关系的稳定是全球共同期望的目标。最不需要的就是中共持续文攻武吓，破坏两岸和平。
I think what we see in Taiwan on one level is very straightforward. We see a very powerful affirmation of democracy.
美国国务卿布林肯17号出席瑞士达沃斯世界经济论坛，不仅再次肯定台湾总统大选是对民主的有力肯定，针对中国不满各国纷纷祝贺台湾的举动，布林肯也有话要说。
Taiwan plays an outsized role in the world. That's why so many countries have a stake in preserving peace, in preserving stability. And again, it's not just us saying this to Beijing. It's country after country.
布林肯强调，台湾海峡货运通行量占全球50%，加上同样身为半导体重镇，想要世界经济稳定，最不需要的就是中共破坏台海和平的挑衅行为。而对菲律宾来说，中国战狼的外交手段或许最能感同身受。
我们建议马克思总统多读书，正确了解台湾问题的来龙去脉。
菲律宾总统小马可是近期罕见祝贺赖清德胜选，中国外交部出言不逊，要菲国总统多读书。菲律宾国防部长铁欧多洛立刻发文反击，反呛毛宁没形象，自甘堕落至做出如此低劣粗俗的发言，侮辱菲律宾总统与人民，却也同时贬低自身以及中国共产党。
In a statement, Ontiveros says the One China policy should be reviewed. China has no business telling Filipinos what to say or not.
台菲友好举动遭到中国酸言酸语回应，菲律宾参议员洪迪威也看不下去，不仅谴责中国无权说三道四，也希望菲律宾外交部能够硬起来，透过这次菲中口角，重新检视一中原则。
Our fundamental interest, the fundamental interest of countries around the world, is to make sure that peace and stability is maintained.
台湾总统大选刺激中国敏感神经，只是中共持续文攻武吓，不仅将菲律宾越推越远，也让美国挺台立场的决心更加坚定。三立新闻谢涛报道。
Let's talk 观点好谈. Joining us now is Bonnie Glaser, the Managing Director of the Indo-Pacific Program at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Glaser, on the program. It's such a great honor to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
My first questions go to, Lai Ching-te won the presidential election while KMT actually became the majority party in the parliament. So what's your take on this election result?
Well, I think it changes the political landscape in Taiwan. Lai Ching-te has not won a very strong political mandate, certainly not the amount of votes or the percentage of votes that Tsai Ing-wen won in 2020 or 2016. And the DPP has lost its majority in the Legislative Yuan and lost 10 seats. And so this will be a challenging political environment for the new president and his administration. But hopefully there will be some bipartisan consensus on some issues, particularly those that relate to Taiwan's security and defense issues, which I think from the U.S. point of view are very important going forward. We want to see KMT, TPP, and DPP support for a strong defense program.
Well, indeed, but so what kind of challenges that you just point out, especially the political environment? You know that you said the bipartisan consensus, is that easy to accomplish in Taiwan's environment as you just observed?
Well, of course, it's not easy in Taiwan, just as it isn't easy in the United States. It's really a very polarized political environment. But I don't think it's impossible to forge consensus on individual issues. And again, that's what I hope that the new administration will be able to do with the opposition, to come up with a consensus that they will support increased defense spending, weapons procurement, increased training, the extension of conscription, which of course was already announced by Tsai Ing-wen's administration. There's a whole set of issues that relate to Taiwan's defense and its resilience that I think are very important.
Now, let's also talk about Xiaobi Kim. She has done a very outstanding job as a diplomat. So what changes do you think that she may bring to Taiwan?
Well, ultimately, this will be a discussion between the vice president elect and the president elect of the direction that they want to take the country. And Xiaobi Kim will be supporting President Lai after the inauguration in May. And I think that Lai Ching-te has already said that he wants to continue many of the policies that Tsai Ing-wen has put in place, especially the approach to China, the preservation of the status quo, continuing to strengthen U.S.-Taiwan relations. And I think that there is no better person than Xiaobi Kim to support Lai Ching-te in that effort, because I think that Xiaobi Kim has a very good understanding of the international community and, of course, the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. She will be able to navigate many of the challenges that Taiwan faces in its relations with the rest of the world because of growing Chinese pressure on Taiwan. So I think that she was an excellent choice for vice president, and I think that she'll make very strong contributions to helping Lai Ching-te to realize his visions for Taiwan.
Now, Taiwan Strait is one of the world's geostrategic flashpoints. So what's your take on the U.S.-China-Taiwan triangular relationship, especially after this election?
Well, the U.S.-China relationship, I think, has reached fragile stability in the aftermath of President Biden's meeting with Xi Jinping this past November. And Taiwan was, of course, one of the issues that was discussed. And President Biden, I think, voiced this time and, of course, many times to Xi Jinping that the United States opposes coercion against Taiwan and any use of force against Taiwan. The United States insists that the differences that exist between Beijing and Taipei be settled peacefully. And hopefully Beijing will agree to resume some kind of communication with the incoming government in Taiwan. I hope that Beijing draws some lessons from the last 8 years. I think the absence of communication between the two sides of the strait has led to misunderstanding. It has led to misperceptions, and it could eventually lead to miscalculation. So the U.S.-China relationship is fragile. The cross-strait relationship has been somewhat tense. China has, of course, increased its military activity around Taiwan. It has been squeezing Taiwan's international space and poaching its diplomatic allies, most recently Nauru, just after the elections. And of course, the third side of that triangle is the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, which is a good news story. I think that we have the highest level of mutual trust between Washington and Taipei than we have ever had. And I think this relationship will go from strength to strength.
Now, you just mentioned that the China's attitude toward Taiwan might be more tense, but would it be more intense in the future? Do we see any change that we can expect coming from China toward Taiwan?
The reaction so far from Beijing to Taiwan's elections, and of course the election of Lai Ching-te and Xiaobi Kim, I think has been not beyond our expectations. There were some statements that were made that came out of the Taiwan Affairs Office, and then also the Foreign Minister Wang Yi, when he was in Cairo, made some remarks as well. These are all things that we have heard from Beijing before. In my view, they are somewhat like placeholders. I think even though Beijing has said it's not going to wait and see, it is not going to give Lai Ching-te any real space. Nonetheless, I think that the Chinese will be restrained in their actions against Taiwan because they want to preserve the fragile stability in the U.S.-China relationship, and because they don't want to be so tough against the incoming President Lai Ching-te that they provoke a strong reaction from him, because that could set in motion a very dangerous dynamic where the United States wants to strengthen its relations with Taiwan, support Taiwan more in reaction to provocative moves by Beijing. This is not in Xi Jinping's interest, and hopefully he knows that. So my sense is that we will see some more actions taken by the Chinese side. In particular, I expect that we will see some more of Taiwan's products that have been sold to China tariff-free since 2010 under the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement. We have seen already 12 of those products have had tariffs reimposed, and I expect we will see more of them. So there will be more economic coercion against Taiwan. But for the most part, other than the Nauru activity of stealing Nauru from Taiwan and increasing economic coercion against Taiwan, I think that Beijing is likely to wait until after the inauguration before we see the full extent of what the reaction from China is to Lai Ching-te.
You just mentioned about the economic coercion. So what about the military actions? Will there be also an increase in that side as well? Can we expect that?
I have heard Chinese experts talk about the possibility of increasing military pressure on Taiwan. We'll have to see what the Chinese do. They've already increased over the last couple of days some of the activity compared to a few weeks prior. But again, in my view, this is not unexpected. The real question, in my mind, is will China do something unprecedented in the military sphere? Operate within the 24 nautical mile contiguous zone, which its Navy ships and its fighter aircraft, as I understand it, have not gone into up to the present. This could happen going forward. I've also heard some Chinese experts say that there could be drones that would fly over Taiwan. These are the kinds of threats that I'm hearing. Whether they will be realized remains to be seen.
Well, we can also see that the Biden administration sent an unofficial delegation to Taiwan right after the election. So what's your take on this?
Well, I think, again, this was fully expected. This is completely in line with precedent. The United States had sent a delegation to Taiwan after Tsai Ing-wen was elected in 2016, and I believe that we did so even before that. Of course, these are two former senior officials. They're not sitting officials. They're very well known to Taiwan. They're close friends of Taiwan. They also are well known by people in Beijing, and I have actually heard some experts, again, scholars, not officials from China, say that this was something that was considered reassuring to Beijing because the messages that they delivered to Taiwan are consistent with U.S. policy and encouraging, for example, that Taiwan, or I should say reminding Taiwan that the United States does not support independence and expressing that the United States opposes unilateral changes in the status quo in the Taiwan Strait by either side. So I believe that Beijing demarched the United States about this delegation, but in practice, I don't think that they viewed it as very provocative.
Now back to the situation back in Taiwan, we know that the election result shows that there are huge differences within Taiwan. So what's your advice to the newly elected president to resolve this problem?
I think I'm going to leave that up to Lai Ching-te to solve. This is a difficult challenge for any president in Taiwan. It's also a very difficult challenge for any president in the United States. But it is important to try and forge consensus, as I said, to build some bipartisanship. It is essential, I think, in a democracy to have different parties work together. But Taiwan and the United States are especially polarized. And I think we both need to work on trying to bring our different parties together with a common purpose of protecting security and our interests.
Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
In light of recent Taiwan presidential election and the shifting dynamics in the region, we're very honored to have Michael Cunningham, research fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Asian Studies Center, with a focus on China's domestic politics and also the foreign policies. Mr. Cunningham is here to share with us his valuable insights. We will discuss perspectives on the election results and also the implications for the U.S.-China-Taiwan relations and expectations regarding China's stance toward Taiwan. Well, thank you, Michael, so much for having you to join us on the show today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, Michael, we know that you've been here since before the election and now past the election. So what's your take on it? It must be a very intense schedule going on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, so many visitors in Taiwan right now. There have been, it seems there was even more interest in this election overseas than there was here in Taiwan. So it was very exciting, a lot going on, and just a lot of excitement in every camp leading up to the election. So now we've got, of course, the results are out, and yeah, lots to unpack there.
Yes, lots to unpack, and we're going to unpack that right now. So we know that Lai Ching-te, he secured this presidential election, and also, but we can observe a very interesting point, that is the KMT actually became the majority of the parliament. So what's your take on this election results?
Yeah, so I think really everyone got something out of this election. So the DPP gets the president. The KMT has the most seats in the legislative yuan, but actually no one has a majority. So now the TPP actually plays a really important role now. And so I guess, really what is it going to mean will depend on how they manage to interact, the various parties going forward. Likely we'll see quite a bit of political gridlock, but it really will depend on how the TPP interacts with who it aligns with, whether it aligns with the KMT to obstruct the DPP, whether it sort of aligns more with the DPP. We know that Ko Wen-je, when he first entered politics, was more aligned with the DPP, or probably most likely, given the party's its DNA and sort of its pragmatism and its values, we may see the TPP sort of most likely sort of take an issue-based approach where it's aligning with the KMT in some issues and with the DPP on other issues. So it's going to be very interesting to see how things unfold going forward.
Yeah, like you said, that everyone gets a part of the benefit out of this, but we also see there is a very significant
internal differences within Taiwanese, what they want now, as we can see from this president election results, because we can see that Lai Ching-te, He You-yi, and Ko Wen-je, the results are actually pretty close. So what's your take on what this, our future president, the challenge of facing such results, because there is no actual majority out of this election. It was like majority out of the minority, we can say that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So President-elect Lai, he did not get a popular mandate. He only got about 40% of the vote, and that's going to be a challenge for him going forward. Now, his speech the other day on Saturday night was actually quite positive. And hopefully we will see the parties be able to work together more. But if we look back at how things have been in the past, we're probably looking at more opposition from the opposition parties than otherwise. And so, yeah, it's going to be a lot of challenges going forward. I think, what Lai has going for him, if he can manage to play this right, is that we do also know from the election that essentially all parties and their supporters, they agree on what the key problems are, the key issues facing Taiwan. And if he can manage to, up front, work really hard and aggressively to address some of the socioeconomic issues, these things take quite a bit of time to bear fruit. And so if he can act on them really early and hope that they're able to bear fruit before the next election, he may have a pretty good chance going forward, both in the next election and at leaving a legacy as the one who has managed to fix a lot of these problems. But it'll be very hard, especially with not having a majority in the legislature and with not even having a popular mandate.
It's a huge task, especially I don't think there is there any other examples of such a scenario happened before, in other countries, president election? Or I think this is a very, very special situation going on in Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened before, right? Chen Shui-bian never had a legislative majority. But the difference then was in the legislature, the two other parties were pan-blue. So this is really a unique situation for Taiwan. It happens in other countries, but for Taiwan, where there's a party with, just a handful of seats that is really going to make the difference. And I think that can be really good for the TPP going forward if they manage to play their cards right and manage to be seen as a force for good as opposed to only for obstruction.
Indeed, especially because people are assuming that 4 years later, their supporters are basically younger supporters. So 4 years later, maybe college students, they graduate, they become adults, and the students get their voting rights, then probably there will be another significant change on the dynamics of Taiwan's political situation. But we also want to address on our Vice President, Xiaobi King, the new elected vice president. We know that she is a very extraordinary diplomat. Through her diplomatic skills, how can we foresee the change that she might bring to the table for Taiwan?
Yeah, so I think her pick as vice president it actually symbolizes continuity more than it does change. So there was some concern before Lai had chosen a vice president candidate. He's from the deeper green side of the party. Is he going to, move in a more radical way? And by picking Xiao as the vice president, he essentially was signaling continuity. And so, the Tsai administration had a lot of success on the diplomatic front as far as unofficial diplomatic allies goes, in particular the relationship with the US and with Europe and whatnot. And all of this was happening even before Xiao became the representative to the US, but she did a tremendous job once she was there, and she is almost universally recognized as having done a really good job there. And so I do think that, for those who are concerned that there will be some radical deviation on the diplomatic side, I think this should really point to the idea that there will probably be more continuity and we'll see more of the same type of progress, continued movement in that direction as far as unofficial diplomacy goes. As far as official diplomacy goes, I guess we'll have to see if Lai and Xiao can manage to hold on to some of the official diplomatic partners so that they don't keep losing them, because that is also very important for Taiwan as far as international legitimacy goes.
Yeah, speaking of this force, we also know that, the Taiwan Strait, there is also always this intense tension going on. And also, what are our expectations of being, because this is a geostrategic flashpoint that's going on, from now on, what's the Taiwan, U.S., and also China's triangular relationship, especially after, like we said, Lai Ching-te and Xiao got elected?
Yeah, well, I think it'll also be very similar to what it was before. So, Taiwan is in a sort of a unique situation in that it's sort of, in a way, caught in the middle of U.S.-China competition, but at the same time, it is, from Beijing's perspective, the most sensitive issue in the U.S.-China relationship. So it plays a really, really interesting role. But I think, on the China side, President-elect Lai has been adamant that he will continue President Tsai's moderate approach, and that's very positive. At the same time, we have to understand that Beijing doesn't view that approach as moderate, and Beijing deeply distrusts the DPP and everyone affiliated with it. So we can't expect to see a reduction of tensions, but at the same time, the same pressures that Beijing is facing, both domestically and internationally, that are impeding it from or keeping it from doing something more drastic, remain in place. And so we should expect to see continued military provocations from Beijing, continued economic measures and measures aimed at really squeezing Taiwan diplomatically. But I would not expect any kind of attack on Taiwan during Lai's tenure, provided things continue generally the way they are, and Taiwan's position and the U.S. position doesn't change. I would say also, on the U.S. side, U.S. support for Taiwan is going to continue to be strong. We're already seeing indications of that, and that the U.S. will remain Taiwan's most important unofficial diplomatic partner.
What's the likelihood of, the tension of the military actions escalating as well?
Well, so the military tension is going to remain. Beijing is going to continue to use military provocations. As far as an actual armed attack on Taiwan, that was unlikely before the election, and it's still unlikely after the election. And the reason for that, from Beijing's perspective, China's leaders have no greater interest than to stay in power in mainland China. And Taiwan is actually a very sensitive issue, to the extent that if they mess this issue up, so let's say they try to take Taiwan by force and they fail, which they believe there's a high likelihood of failure, especially given that they assume that the U.S. and Japan would both intervene on Taiwan's behalf. And so it's just so risky for them to attack Taiwan unprovoked. Now, if Taiwan were to move towards formal independence, that would be a different issue. But even if Lai wanted to do that, and all of his more recent statements and his selection of Xiao indicate that he does not even intend to move in any direction like that. But even if he wanted to, there are so many constraints to doing that. It would essentially probably require a constitutional amendment, which would be essentially impossible. Even if the DPP had a firm legislative majority, it would be essentially impossible. And so the likelihood of movement in that direction, in the direction that would be clearly crossing Beijing's red line, is extremely low. The greatest risk continues to be as Beijing engages in military provocations, that escalation could occur and miscalculation on one side or the other, and that could lead to some kind of armed conflict. So that's what I'd be most concerned about.
Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us and sharing with us your expertise today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
也门青年运动武装组织 Houthis 从去年11月开始多次的攻击行经红海的船只，那表面上呢是宣称要来阻止以色列进攻加萨，实际上却是无差别的攻击行为。于是美国带头向也门发动空袭，要它适可为止。不过属于伊朗抵抗轴心的这 Houthis 有强烈的伊斯兰信仰，还有反西方的色彩，恐怕并不会乖乖的就范。而不断的冲突已经造成了航运公司人人自危，纷纷他们避开红海，绕到非洲南部。而航运的绕行的高成本，可能会间接的导致于民生物价的上涨，再度引爆的是全球的通膨危机，最后会冲击到的就是你我的生活。
美国航母上的战机起飞，喷出烈焰，照亮夜空。英国塞浦路斯皇家空军基地也有战机起飞加入行动。英美率领多国联军1月10号锁定也门境内发动空袭。
We've seen reports of explosions in major western Yemenite cities like Al Hudaydah and several other cities there. That the likely result of these U.S. strikes. The strikes carried out by U.S. fighter jets as well as Tomahawk missiles. Those are land attack missiles launched from Navy vessels.
也门的反政府青年运动又叫胡塞武装组织，多处据点遭到联军空袭，因为他们在红海的国际航道闹出大事。时间倒回2023年11月19号，胡塞武装分子搭直升机登陆名为“银河领袖号”的货轮，荷枪实弹闯入剑桥，吓得船员魂飞魄散，还劫持25名人质，理由竟然是货轮的船东和以色列有关。胡塞组织锁定在红海和亚丁湾航行的商船，多次发射无人机和飞弹，借此来要求以色列停止攻击加萨。也门首都沙那抗议群众挤满街头，他们挥舞巴勒斯坦和也门的旗帜，谴责以色列的军事行动。胡塞利用名气锁定外国船只，发动攻击。胡塞不止无视警告，还反过来指控发起繁荣守护行动的美国才是罪魁祸首，结果马上遭受联军回击。
We've put together a group of nations that are going to say that if they continue to act and behave as they do, we'll respond.
Our aim is very clear. It's to de-escalate tensions and to restore stability to the region. And that's why allies over the past few weeks have issued several statements of condemnation of what's happening, calling on the Houthis to desist.
尽管指挥中心、发射器、弹药库和雷达站等多处重要军事设施被炸毁，胡塞却丝毫不退让，甚至扬言报复。
لن نتردد إن شاء الله في فعل كل ما نستطيع. وسنواجه العدوان الأمريكي. أي اعتداء أمريكي لن يبقى أبدا بدون رد.
局势升温，航运首当其冲。红海和亚丁湾航线占比全球航运量的12%，更是苏伊士运河的门户，对于国际贸易至关重要。
The rebels say this is to support Palestinians stuck in the Gaza Strip amid Israel's war on Hamas, though many of the ships that they've been attacking don't have any clear links to Israel. This has endangered shipping up the Red Sea, into the Suez Canal, into the Mediterranean Sea, and onward to Europe.
为了避免成为下一个目标，国际航运巨头丹麦马士基、德国赫伯罗德，还有台湾货柜三雄长荣、阳明、万海也都相继宣布改道，航程更长，成本也跟着飙高。
What's happened because of these Houthi attacks against commercial shipping is that thousands of ships have had to divert, take longer routes, pay more for insurance. And that gets translated into higher prices for people for everything from fuel to medicine to food.
许多航运公司都宣布改走好望角，绕过非洲大陆，航程可能得多花10天以上。从东南亚到欧洲也增加超过3000海里。
So far, until the military attacks, we had seen a week-on-week fall
of 9% in vessel transits in the Red Sea and 26% fall year on year.
商船改道耗费更多油料，货柜也要更久才会抵达。专家分析，往返欧亚一趟可能要多付100万美元的燃料费用，供应链受阻的成本又是转嫁到消费者身上。
It is also a reasonable assumption that just because of the strikes on the Houthis in Yemen, the atrocities in the Red Sea will not stop. Actually, they will intensify, in my opinion.
虽然英美联军试图警告胡塞别再破坏航行安全，但是专家悲观认为，愤怒的伊斯兰武装团体恐怕不会善罢甘休。对于民众生活而言，冲突可能间接影响民生物价，导致通膨再度死灰复燃。
Continued Houthi threats to maritime navigation, coupled with the risk of further military escalation, remains of serious concern and could potentially impact millions in Yemen, the region, and globally.
联合国安理会1月10号通过决议，以最强烈的措辞谴责胡塞破坏自由航行权。不过，也门青年运动似乎不为所动。青年运动起源于1990年，发起人胡塞信奉伊斯兰教什叶派，反对沙烏地阿拉伯的逊尼派。他们反政府20年，控制首都沙那，也在西部山区和红海沿岸拥兵自重。
Established by former MP and religious scholar Hussein al-Houthi. Al-Houthi said he wanted to protect and revive Zaydi Islam, a sect of Shiism that makes up 35% of Yemen's population.
胡塞和巴勒斯坦的哈马斯、黎巴嫩的真主党同属伊朗率领的反西方联盟抵抗轴心，他们听命德黑兰在中东地区进行军事活动。
Since 2015, they've been battling a Saudi-led coalition there that supports the exiled government of Yemen. Now, the Houthis have received both support and weaponry from Iran as that war has gone on.
被说是主谋的伊朗反批美国才是中东乱源。面对教唆代理人袭击的指控，伊朗矢口否认。
ضمن اینکه موضع ما در حمایت از فلسطین روشن هست، اقداماتی که دیگران انجام میدن نباید به حساب گروه‌های نیابتی ایران گذاشته بشه. ما هیچ گروه نیابتی در منطقه نداریم.
不过可以肯定的是，伊朗支持的胡塞等激进组织仇恨美国和以色列，群众焚烧旗帜，武装分子攻击商船，结果受害的是全球经济。
全球 What's Up？Tesla 创办人 Elon Musk 日前在社群网站上面发布了 Tesla 研发的这个人形机器人自己在折衣服的影片。尽管呢引发了惊艳，但是也引起网友质疑是造假，发现影片疑似有经过剪切，而且是有人在旁边在远端的操控。那 Elon Musk 随后呢也坦诚，目前机器人其实是没有办法来完成自主折衣服的任务，要期待机器家事小帮手还得再等等了。感谢您今天的收看，我是刘晨曦，我们下周再会。